Welcome back to the NITE Economics channel, and today we're going to be looking at the S&P 500 priced in Bitcoin. So I went off and marked off my chart here. So all of these red ovals here represent the bear market in Bitcoin. So it's a bull market for the S&P 500 versus Bitcoin during these periods. So it's pretty much just like an inverted chart of the Bitcoin chart, really. If you were to flip this chart, it looks very much like the Bitcoin chart. Not quite, but it's very similar looking. So if you look at the previous bear market in Bitcoin, which is right here, so that's for 2022, end of 2021 into 2022, and pretty much all of 2022, you could see that Bitcoin's bear market pretty much ended when the S&P 500 priced in Bitcoin touched the 200-week simple moving average, which it actually did that a couple of weeks ago, right over here in the end of the beginning of February here, and now it's pretty much come down and is consolidating. So now to me, I would say it's doing something kind of similar to this, where it went up quite high, came back down, and now it's consolidating, and then it's probably going to have another wick up. I think it's going to likely come up, and it's likely going to actually get above this 200 simple moving average, because my base case is essentially Bitcoin's going to get around to maybe mid 50s, maybe as low as 50,000, possibly even potentially get a wick down to 49,000 in US dollars, right? So if Bitcoin's already here, or the S&P 500 already pretty much touched this 200, yeah, it pretty much touched it. It literally just hit it and it bounced, or it got rejected at the 200-week simple moving average. So if Bitcoin does get down to those prices, you know, mid 50s, maybe as low as 50, maybe even potentially as low as 45K, but I don't think that's going to happen. And if it does, it's just going to be a wick, and then it's going to come back up to, you know, mid to high 50s. Then yeah, you're going to see the S&P go into this region. But if you look at also in terms of time, we're about halfway through this bear market. If it were to end in October, if it were to last about 1 year, I've made in one of my videos that I could see the bear market for Bitcoin pretty much, or Bitcoin seeing a bottom in this bear market sometime in the summertime, July. Maybe if we get very lucky in May, but my base case is more or less we're going to see it at the end of July, around that period, you know, give or take a month or two. And they'll probably live down there for a while before Bitcoin starts to start its new bull run going into next year, and so 2027, 2028, 2029. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with this specific chart and see how high the S&P gets versus Bitcoin, although I don't think it's going to get all that high. And it's not just because Bitcoin is going to go down further. I think that obviously that is a part of it. Another reason is that I think the S&P 500 is showing some topping behavior here. So I got off here and marked off all of the Januaries, and the S&P 500. Let's look at it in this chart's better. And the S&P 500. Well, actually, not the January. Sorry, these are actually the Q1s of the S&P 500 for the last 25 years. And as you can see, let me turn off the moving averages here. As you could see, the S&P 500, for the most part, really starting from the end of the great financial crisis right here, that was the last red month that it had, the last red first quarter, the last red first quarter, not the last one, let me rephrase what I'm trying to say. In the last 20 years, that was the first time, right? So pretty much, yeah, well, more than 20 years, but let me rephrase, I'll say that again. Since this bear market began in the S&P 500, right, that it started with a red Q1, Then you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 green Q1s, consecutive green Q1s in a row before you saw a red Q1, which is right here in 2018. Then we saw a green one in 2019, a red, big, massive red one, of course, during the corona, and then green, red, and it's kind of been going back and forth for the most part. I would say here, this one is pretty much a coin flip to see whether it's going to be red or green. There's still 1 month and 11 days left to go. But sometimes you could see this bit of a pattern here that when if the quarter looks kind of flat like this, as you can see here, it could go off to run up a bit in the following quarters or Q2. In this particular, this is not Q2, but it could potentially run up in Q2 and then dump off. As you could see here, it did that twice. You had this kind of like, I don't know what this candle pattern is, but it looks like a cross to me. It's not. It doesn't have a thick body like the other ones. The opening and close is very close to each other. You have some wicks up and down, and then essentially you have a bullish following quarter, and then you have a red, and that's happened twice. You could see that it happened twice here and here, right? That was in 2019. And then 2021. Will we see something like that again? It's hard to say, but I do feel like the S&P 500 here is topping somewhat. I'm not saying it's going to come crashing down, but I think a healthy correction will be beneficial for the overall health of the market. And then we could see higher prices going into next year, potentially. But maybe even this year, I can't say this with 100% certainty, because trying to go on the opposite of the S&P 500 is usually a losing bet. But I do see some weakness building here, the S&P 500. And when you look at the price of gold, or you look at the S&P 500 price in gold, it becomes very evident that the S&P 500 is actually breaking down, especially to precious metals. So we'll see if that continues. I think it will continue. And like I've said in this channel before, this could take several months, if not years, to really play out. So that's all I have for today, guys. I hope you're liking the content. If you do, drop a like. So don't forget to subscribe. That's very important. That really helps out the channel. As you can see, my channel is quite small. It's but a newborn, if you will. And yeah, if you're liking the content, like I said, subscribe, drop a like. That's very helpful, and leave a comment. And I'll see you guys next time.